the Ministry of Housing, Ministry of Finance, in pursuing to build housing, a decent housing, social housing for the Egyptian citizens in such a very crucial time, through which confronting the dangerous slums that have negative impact in Egypt through exporting such thought and the random behaviors the state is eradicating and confronting through the awareness and establishing very important projects to be implemented on the ground. While the President of the Republic, President Abdel Fattah Sisi, inaugurates such important projects of the housing.
مصر عايزة ايه؟ عايزة ايد لحظة وجعها تشيل آلامها، عايزة تشوف المخلصين رافعين علمها، عايزة قلب صاحي الخوف ما يعرفوش، عايزة عمال في المصانع ما يناموش، عايزة لما تنادي يا ابني تشوف 90 مليون بابني، عايزة الكل يشيل جميلها ما ينساهوش. عارفين مصر عايزة ايه؟ عايزة منا فعل مش عايزة كلامنا، كل ما هنخاف عليها هتبقى جنة، عايزاها صحراء خضرا بإيد الفلاحين، ونعلم الجيل اللي طالع هي مين، عايزة لما تنادي يا ابني تشوف 90 مليون بابني، عايزة الكل يشيل جميلها ما ينساهوش. عايزة الكل يشيل جميلها ما ينساهوش. عارفين مصر عايزة ايه؟ ايه؟ عايزة ايد لحظة وجعها تشيل آلامها، عايزة تشوف المخلصين رافعين علمها، عايزة قلب صاحي الخوف ما يعرفوش، عايزة عمال في المصانع ما يناموش، عايزة لما تنادي يا ابني تشوف 90 مليون بابني، عايزة الكل يشيل جميلها ما ينساهوش. عارفين مصر عايزة ايه؟ عايزة منا فعل مش عايزة كلامنا، كل ما هنخاف عليها هتبقى جنة، عايزاها صحراء خضرا بإيد الفلاحين، ونعلم الجيل اللي طالع هي مين، عايزة لما تنادي يا ابني تشوف 90 مليون بابني، عايزة الكل يشيل جميلها ما ينساهوش. عايزة الكل يشيل جميلها ما ينساهوش. عارفين مصر عايزة ايه؟ عارفين مصر عايزة ايه؟ عايزة ايد لحظة وجعها تشيل آلامها، عايزة تشوف المخلصين رافعين علمها، عايزة قلب صاحي الخوف ما يعرفوش، عايزة عمال في المصانع ما يناموش، عايزة لما تنادي يا ابني تشوف 90 مليون بابني، عايزة الكل يشيل جميلها ما ينساهوش. عارفين مصر عايزة ايه؟ عايزة منا فعل مش عايزة كلامنا، كل ما هنخاف عليها هتبقى جنة، عايزاها صحراء خضرا بإيد الفلاحين، ونعلم الجيل اللي طالع هي مين، عايزة لما تنادي يا ابني تشوف 90 مليون بابني، عايزة الكل يشيل جميلها ما ينساهوش. عايزة الكل يشيل جميلها ما ينساهوش. عارفين مصر عايزة ايه؟ عايزة الكل يشيل جميلها ما ينساهوش. عارفين مصر عايزة ايه؟
اللي شايفه حلم أو خيال، أوصف الجمال ده أقول في إيه؟ اللي جه وشاف ده كله قال بصوا شوفوا مصر عاملة إيه. ده اللي شايفه خيال واخد قلبي وعيني، الجمال ده يا عيني جنة ولا عالبال. اللي شايفه خيال واخد قلبي وعيني، الجمال ده يا عيني جنة ولا عالبال. شايفه حلم أو خيال، أوصف الجمال ده أقول في إيه؟ اللي جه وشاف ده كله قال بصوا شوفوا مصر عاملة إيه. ده اللي شايفه خيال واخد قلبي وعيني، الجمال ده يا عيني جنة ولا عالبال. اللي شايفه خيال واخد قلبي وعيني، الجمال ده يا عيني جنة.
السيسي رئيس الجمهورية.
The President of the Republic of Egypt. Peace be upon you all. Please be seated.
بسم الله
In the name
الرحمن
of Allah, the
الرحيم.
most passionate, the most
السيد
merciful,
الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي
His Excellency Mr. President Abdel Fattah Sisi, the President of the Republic, dear attendees in Egypt today, writing together a new page of hope in its present and future. Such a hope that is being taken a methodology in the new republic that is built by the loyalty of their sons, its army, and the trust of its people. People were given by the political leaderships and a noticeable concern, a development achieved in Egypt every day. The biggest proof is what we are witnessing of an inauguration, a new set of social housing to provide a decent life for the Egyptian citizen. The best to start our day verses of the Holy Quran recited by
بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير. وأسروا قولكم أو اجهروا به إنه عليم بذات الصدور. ألا يعلم من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير. هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور. صدق الله العظيم.
Upon the effort of the Egyptian state in implementing national projects that have succeeded in tackling the crisis of housing that been piled up for decades, but the state were able in a very standard and unprecedented period to execute the future and the outlook of the housing crisis in Egypt. Mr. Premier Dr. Mustafa Madbouli is having the speech upon such an issue. In the name of Allah, the most passionate, the most merciful, Your Excellency, Mr. President Badr City, ladies and gentlemen, many happy returns upon the new occasions of the new Hijri year that we praise to Almighty God to be blessed for Egypt and the Islamic world. We'd like to welcome you in Badr City as a happy occasion to open a new national project of the housing. The housing dossier is one of the biggest dossiers tackled by the Egyptian state throughout the past 7 years. In order to transform the Egyptian state by the main goal, which is improving the quality of the life of the Egyptian people. Thanks to the Almighty God, the Egyptian state tackled the dossier throughout 7 years that burdened the Egyptian state, such as infrastructures, roads, gas, electricity, dossiers such as the education and the health. Such dossiers were tackled bravely by the Egyptian state throughout such a period to compensate what has been long-standing for decades. Certainly, the political leadership and the follow-up of His Excellency Mr. President and the effort of the state enabled us to reach what we have reached following 7 years, and yet still great paths to be taken, as said by His Excellency Mr. President, that have already made a step of 1,000 steps. Here, I would like to point out, if we can say that the Egyptian states have problems, fairly enough to say that the circumstances of the Egyptian states in the last decades weren't able to tackle such dossiers due to circumstances such as wars, instability, that made the state incapable of doing so. But the biggest change that we should put beforehand, that the accompanies such a circumstance, is the great challenges, the excessive population. To compare, Egypt in 1900 were 9 million Egyptian citizens, and less than 120 years we were 102 million Egyptian citizens, which is 11 times of the populations. That added a great challenge upon the shoulder of the Egyptian state that made us that we should stand simply upon throughout the efforts. If such an issue continued, we would have the unpleasant positive impact for the Egyptian state. I'd like to point out, when we started to talk about such an issue, some points raised that the excessive population is a plus, but it is a strength of the Egyptian state. But through the world countries' experiences, developed countries, that the excessive populations is exceeding the ability of the Egyptian state in the provision, services, facilities, and housing, that make it a challenge. Throughout the reason the development is laying out programs to control such an excessive population, to eliminate such a gap and execute mega projects throughout the time, to sit back and by saying, and thanks to the Almighty God, we were built looking out the such countries to back forward to laying out programs and executing the housing. It's such a project throughout the decades. The capabilities of the Egyptian state weren't able to tackle such an excessive population, among of which the housing dossier. The issue of housing has continued throughout decades, which is a real issue that faced the Egyptian state. The Egyptian state tried to solve out the problem by themselves. Unfortunately, as a result, the building and in a simple outlook of the Egyptian state resulted the excessive of the slums and the dangerous areas that were throughout the cities of the Egyptian Republic throughout the decades. In fact, the Egyptian state throughout the past 7 years laid out a clear and aggressive strategies. Back forward, please. So, the strategies what we've worked out on through this decades upon two pivots. As the state, less than 7% of the space of Egypt were indeed disseminated horizontally through the construction of the land, new areas, and the emergence of the new cities to be developed, among of which Badr City. Also, establishing new generation of city, as we said it, the fourth generation. Upon the directives of His Excellency, Mr. President, in parallel, we were working on the most difficult and complicated, which is developing the existing construction. Some points were spread and commented while you building cities and leaving aside the deteriorated existing construction. We were working in parallel in order to tackle Islam area and deteriorated areas. Firstly, we're working in an area that has inhabitants already. We need to understand them, to build a new housing. If we are going to transform them, even if we have the intention to rebuild in the same area, it is yet need to a temporary area, and then we deconstruct this area and build them. But we were working in the same time. But people were saying and seeing speedily the results of a very early period. But in fact, we are working in parallel. If we are taking in the existing construction, we're taking programs, thanks to the Almighty God, the state are working on with developing the slums governorate through a new housing program launched by His Excellency Mr. President by establishing 1 million units and the developing the Egyptian country through decent life initiative initiated by His Excellency Mr. President. In fact, Your Excellency, thanks to the Almighty God, we succeeded to double the rates of constructing the housing units in Egypt in comparison with the past 40 years. The average of the Egyptian state in construction in 76 to 2005 were about 42,000. Doubled 48,000 from 2005 to 2013. In fact, what we built in the past 7 years is doubled through the construction were made in the last 40 years, which is considered, yet it is still a step, and it is targeted to increase such rate through the upcoming period. In fact, I would leave to my brother the Ministry of Housing to present all the features of the social housing or the housing for a housing for all Egyptians that directed by His Excellency Mr. President. But allow me to concentrate on the very important part of the dangerous areas. To remind you, what was Egypt before in 2014? We were extracting from the newspapers. If you read the date in 2014, and if you remember the incident of Al-Dawika where Reuters was saying, despite the dangers of the slums, we're going to stay in the 21st century. The week following the disaster weren't finished yet. Such titles of the newspapers, in fact, upon His Excellency Mr. President assumed his office, that made a pivotal goal that will not allow to set aside the existing situation. Such an issue should be solved no matter the cost. Egypt is our homeland, is that we should be for a while to remove such a feature and such a picture, but we are changing for the sickness of the circumstances of the people. We are going to say to them that we are standing with you. We're not going to leave you to live here. We're not going to let our children to be raised in such an area. These were the directives of the president throughout the last 6 years. We're not going to leave our children to be raised in such areas. The Egyptian state has worked in sorting out such an issue from the point of the Egyptian citizens of having a decent life, which is one of the rights of the human rights that should be highlighted, on top of which the quality of the life of the Egyptian citizens to live in a very decent life. And in fact, if we started with the dangerous, we have 375 in slums at a cost of 63 billion Egyptian pounds, despite the unplanned areas that should be eradicated because of the deteriorated status of the housing. But the slums were built of lacking services that were a great challenge that the Egyptian state is working upon. In addition to the slums that were spread throughout the Republic, the Egyptian state has spent more than 300 billion Egyptian pounds to change the feature of Egypt that were inhuman. In fact, the dangerous areas, as I said, were spread around 25 governorates. By their numbers, Cairo were in top 54 areas were inhabited by the 30% of the population were in Cairo. In fact, we weren't just to build housing, but to develop it totally by providing the housing. All acceptable services should be provided, whether they are social, healthy, and economic, not just to build a housing unit. Our status that we've ended mostly to establish nearly 100%. We were inhabited 90% and the 10% were left. As I said, we're just ending the last services with some touches, and before the end of this year to house the citizen in such areas respectively. But the process of building will ended in reality as an obstruction. What were we? These areas. To focus on each picture as a model, because this was the picture 6 years ago. The following pictures were in the same areas. As you can see, the same areas with the same needs. The Egyptian state were able to change the feature of such areas. I explain in details in each area what were done. Quickly, but 2 points to summarize the picture. What were we and what we are now? Our efforts in Cairo governorates as a model for all the governorates throughout the Republic. Cairo were in 2015 54 areas of 70,000 required of an alternative housing. Following such a period, we've ended totally what was left 15 areas to be transformed in new areas in El Salam and Ma'an areas. At the end of this year, these areas, God willing, will be built totally and will be eradicated from the map of the governorates. Magra al-Ayun as a picture before developing, and how the houses were built, and after we entered. This is a picture of Magra al-Ayun and al-Madabar area, as well as Batn al-Baqar areas that were eradicated recently. This is the land, and a big project will be shown to shaking the areas surrounding. This is the picture where abound and how our families were built into, and as well as Maspiru areas. And thanks to the Almighty God, the process of developing is undergoing. This is the area before and after, before, as well as the crafts rock to build new civilized workshops to move the unplanned areas and what were before removing it, and the areas of Zabalin 15th Mayu district that were built on the status of floods that were being evacuated following such an incident. Now we're going to show the new housing that were built in front, and Tal al-Aqarib area, as well as Al-Tibi, the triangle of Tal al-Aqarib and Al-Tibi, and we've already built Rudat al-Sayda and evacuated Al-Tibi, and will be built an extension to change the heart of the Cairo future. In fact, in order to know where these people went and what about the efforts, when we launched Al-Asmarat 1 and 2 that contain these areas that we were shown, and our families were there to live there. And in order to see the picture before, as you can see, we're moved to Al-Asmarat 1 and 2, as you can see in pictures provided by all services on the level of housing. Asmarat 3, all these areas in front of you were moved. This is the form and picture before, and it is importantly to remind us, as directed by His Excellency Mr. President, to work day and night to move our families. Al-Mahrousa 1 and 2, the parts were moved from Hikr al-Sakakini and Ashish al-Muhajirin, and we'll show you pictures or such were moved in Al-Mahrousa 1 and 2. In fact, Ahalina 1, made by the armed forces, been moved at the Azbat Abu Kela. This is the form of Al-Tawari Azba, as developed with all services 1,100 families were moved, and the area of Tal al-Aqarib, as shown, were moved in Rauda district, were evacuated and rebuilt in the same location. A triangle of Maspero today, thanks to the Almighty God, we are making the alternative housing will be presented by Minister of Housing later on. These areas that we are talking about evacuation through the upcoming 1 to 2 months, since Lagos, which is in dangerous areas, and these are the units that were finished, effective on the upcoming week, will be starting the housing of the people. Azbit Abu Qarn will be the largest area to be evacuated, affiliated to the area of Amr ibn al-As Mosque. This is a new picture. We've already started to house the people. 250 families took the units already, and to follow up in the upcoming months, we'll start to rehouse the families of Azbit al-Qarn to be evacuated totally among the developing of Al-Fastat area. Al-Salam area, which is the alternative area of the Al-Zaraib of the 15th Mayo district, and we've already started the measures and procedures of the housing. Ard al-Khayala, we've already finished the housing, starting the building schools to be rehouse the people, which is planned to end all the areas of Cairo by the end of this year, to disappear such areas from the map of Cairo governorates. Most of them were evacuated already. We didn't not work on such dangerous areas. We've already worked on in the unplanned areas. We were talking that by choosing 135 areas on a space of 132,000 Fidin, inhabited by 6 to 7 million population. We've ended 56 areas, and the left is undergoing, because what we are working on, that we enter in the developing, this is what we've developed, and the undeveloping, or the developing undergoing, by a great package of services, by evacuating some areas, houses that built by cement, to be compared by the Al-Amal area or Al-Hagana, previously known. In the same model, we enter to evacuate and remove some buildings to create and establish roads and extend the sanitation services and water, and provide services on the empty lands for our people. Such models for the area were built in Al-Zawiya Al-Hamra, the new valley, how to enter and to make painting for the and landscape in some areas, and this is an area of Al-Gharbiya governorate in Al-Mahalla. And the new valley, how do we do the painting and pavement for the roads in Abu al-Hilal areas in Al-Minya governorate. This is the value of planning for upon existing building, which is difficult for, because the people still living there. By taking the process by the scissors of a surgeon that had cost as directed by you, Your Excellency, Mr. President, enter new programs for Cairo and the rest of governorates. We are talking about developing the Islamic and historic areas that has a very heritage values that is today it isn't acceptable to leave it like that, to start the developing and to maximize the benefit. In the meantime, to develop the rest of governorates and big cities by using the lands that were owned by the state within such cities that has unacceptable activities to take such land and start to build new housing projects and development by providing them housing units for the existing areas that we are targeting 500,000 housing units. We are targeting to once again rebuilt the old historic Cairo and gaining the old form of the history and to maintain the heritage buildings and the construction fabrics and to remove the unacceptable activities by providing new ones. We are working today on new areas such as Babzuela, Al-Fustat, and I put into Al-Hussein Mosque area just to show models of these projects we're talking about. Babzuela area, this is the form of construction due to the deterioration and negligence, and it is targeted to enter the deteriorated and wreckage areas to be removed and to be regained by the Islamic nature by developing doing a full development for the electric network and grid. Al-Hakim area also, I like just to look at the pictures as directed by His Excellency Mr. President, not to leave it by this form. This is the outlook of this area upon the process of developing Darb al-Lapana area, as you can see, and the developing project that is undergoing to revive such an area to be in a World Heritage Area. Al-Fustat area, which is that we are working in different directions. Al-Fustat, the old Al-Fustat area, this is Batn al-Baqara following the evacuation. It's a new image that within the developing project it is planned to re-establish the central garden for garden as we are doing it in the new administrative capital on a space that is nearly on 500 feet-ins of its affiliation that has the entertainment elements. We've evacuated Batn al-Baqara and Azbat al-Baqar, and we are evacuated already the dangerous areas. This is the area of Magra al-Ayun that were evacuated and removed. This is a picture of the undergoing project on the ground. I'm putting the picture of the buildings, and these were the designs and to change the future of such an area. We're talking about Mantiqat al-Haya and how did we remove, and Mr. President has honored us by removing the mummies, and we inaugurated the area in total by changing its picture in the Great Cairo area. 4,050 families were there, and it is planned to rebuild the entertainment heart and green heart of Cairo to be, as you can see the picture, containing great and big garden areas and historic places. And this is the main area before Amr bin Al-As Mosque to be a part of a bigger project that's been implemented, and Mr. President is putting a pressure on us to finish it as soon as possible. And the new project is proposed to be a housing area, to have a housing or alternative housing to change once again the life for our people living on the unplanned areas. This is a general outlook to have a landscape on the Al-Fustat garden and or park. Another project, which is the capitals of the governorates and big cities, 500,000 housing units. We've already started in working in 25% and followed by the rest of the lands to be built with the cooperation of the engineering authority. They are the designs, these are the shape of buildings that we deliberately to move away from Cairo and working on Al-Suez, that is targeted to build around 20,000 new housing units to rehouse upon the inconvenient areas. This is the project related in the Ahalina project in number 3 in Al-Qalyubiya governorate. We are finishing the project, and as well as Dumyat governorates, another project. These were models of the area throughout the big cities of Egypt. Later on, as I said, to have finished the 500,000 housing units on the capitals of the governorate to complete the unplanned, developing the unplanned areas as well as the historic Cairo. This project is exceeding the cost of 280 billion Egyptian pounds to change the picture of Egypt. His Excellency, Mr. President, not to stop the developing process, and upon the upcoming period we should continue. If we continued in dangerous areas, we should enter the unplanned areas to reshape the quality of lives of our people, to change the face of Egyptian cities as total. As we said in the country of Egypt as a title for the new republic throughout the upcoming years. Allow me, Mr. President, to play a short video film to see the shape of the area and presenting the opinions of the people by taking new housing units that are living in recently. This is the shape of the area in the past. I live in Izbit Abu Arn that has inflicted a very bad housing that we were suffering in the winter by rains. The rooms weren't vast enough. We were afraid of the children were infected by snakes. This is a dream for us. The life was very bad. I was living in very small rooms in my father's house. I used to pray to have a better life for us and our children. Thanks to the Mr. President. Now we are enjoying a very new life. It's better than before. Now we're living in a very decent flat. We're living in a very clean area, and the furniture is good. That has everything, LED screen, fridge, that we had everything apart from our clothes. We have a living room of every furniture, and we have fridge and cooks. The flat is very clean, that we are enjoying the life of everything. We never had living room, bedrooms as provided by His Excellency Mr. President. Thank the Almighty God. Thanks to President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, we pray to Almighty God to have him a long life, and I'm very proud that we have Mr. President. I thank Mr. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi that has a plan for the people to live in decent life, to raise their quality of life, to live in a very decent life. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. In the name of Allah, the most with the most passionate, please show us the first slide presented by Mr. Premier. No, the following one, please. The following that has the shape of housing the dangerous areas. Following this one, please. That was about 10 areas. No, not this one. The first, yeah. Yes, please, here. Stop here, please. I would like to say to you, we are talking on such issues a lot. The issue is that we are working upon it in an integrated context and outlook for the Egyptian state in general. What you can see is a translation as said by Mr. Prey in 1900, where 9 million, and now we are above 1 million. Following 100 years, so what happened to make it clear for the people that we are talking about the population growth that is above the capability of the state? It is resulted by behaviors that merely to lead to the destroying the state in 2011. What you can see that state never were enabled to fulfill the demands of growth, because the people were living on a flat that we can pay 1 to 150 Egyptian pounds for such a place.
مش بقى زي ما احنا بنقول
Not
إيه ده
just we
فساد
can say
العشوائيات.
is the corruption of slums. No, it isn't the issue. The state weren't able to control its status. The Egyptian state weren't able to control its status upon roads, housing, yes. In each facility, in education, health, yes. In any sector you may talk about. What I'm saying that as always the issue of awareness is a dangerous issue that the face in societies, not just in Egypt. People see reality or status by saying who is the responsible, the weakness of officials, lacking of political leadership. The whole issue, as you can see, is about matters
مركبة
that piled up
يصعب على الدولة تجاوزها
exist in
والمجتمع في
a
النهاية عايز
state. The state is disabled to confront. The people want to live, isn't capable to live that way. I'd like to ask a question for sociologists.
الحياة هنا لولادنا الأطفال
By
الصغيرين
saying the life for our children, boys or girls, to be raised on
القيم والمبادئ ايه؟
mindsets,
السلوكيات العامة ايه؟ المستقبل والطموح ايه؟
behaviors, future and ambition.
أنا عايز أسألكم
I would like to ask
ليكم
you,
كلكم
to all of you,
يبقى النهارده لو ما خدناش بالنا
today if we're not
تقولي طب ما
taking
انت مش انت
paying
احنا
attention
حلينا
by
المسألة مش
saying
كده
if we solve
طب انتوا حليتوها
the
ازاي؟
issue, how did you solve
فضل
the
كبير
issue?
قوي
It
من
is an
ربنا على
great
مصر.
bless
من أول
by the
2011 لغاية
Almighty
النهاردة.
God, starting by 2011
المفروض ما
till
يبقاش حاجة كده
now.
خالص.
We shouldn't
المفروض إن
shouldn't
الكلام
be
ده
the
اللي انتوا
case
شايفينه ده
as you,
مع الوضع اللي حصل في
by
2011
saying
نفضل
in
نتقاتل مع بعضنا
comparison
البعض
of the status in
والبلد دي تروح أكتر من أي
2011
دولة من
to
الدول اللي انتوا
fight
بتشوفوها
each
في دولنا
other's,
المختلفة. طب انت بتكرر
and
الكلام
then to
تاني
have
ليه؟
a very bad picture
مش
for
بتحب
our
المسألة؟
state. Why you are repeating
وهنكمل
this? Aren't you are solving the
وهنكمل
issue?
حل.
I
بس
say
صدقوني
yes, and we are continue to
الحل
do
ده ما
so.
كانش يبقى فيه
Believe me,
ضبط للنمو
if we
السكاني
not having a control
وتنظيم
of population
لمصاريفنا
growth,
المسار
controlling
بتاعنا.
our
طب سؤال هي
spend,
الشقة
the question is
البيت
to be
اللي
raised the apartment or
أي بيت
any
هو بديله
house,
بكام من الناحية التانية؟
its alternative,
بديله
what
بكام يا
is
دكتور
the
مصطفى؟
cost.
النهارده
I
دخل على
asked the
450,000
question
جنيه
for
من غير
Mr.
الأرض.
Premier is about
مش كده يا دكتور مصطفى؟ ولا إيه؟ خلي
450,000
حضرتك تستريح.
Egyptian
يعني
pound
الشقة دي
apart from the
البيت
land.
ده
Such an
الشقة دي
apartment,
البيت ده
such an
أنا بغيره
house, I
ب 400,000
change
جنيه
by
و
at a cost
450,000
of
جنيه من غير تمن الأرض ومن غير المرافق.
450,000
ده وكمان بنقول لا
pound.
لازم كمان يعني احتراما وتقديرا لأهلنا اللي هنا
In respect
إحنا
to
لازم
our
نفرش الشقة
people,
كمان.
this
الشقة بتاخد لها حدود
house should
50,000
be
جنيه
fully furnished,
فرش.
that at a cost of 150,000 Egyptian
طب يا
pound.
ترى في مقابل للموضوع
What
دوت
is in return
في اللي احنا بنعمله؟
concerning what we are working
مفيش مقابل
on?
يعني ما بنبيعش
Nothing.
عشان
We are not
الشقة دي
selling
للناس بنقول لهم
such an
فقط
apartment for the
ادفعوا
people
تمن
by saying
الصيانة بتاعت
only
المكان اللي
to
انتوا فيه عشان
pay the
يستمر.
maintenance,
إن كان
just
في
to
أسانسير يفضل
be
شغال،
sustainable.
إن كان في مرافق تفضل شغالة، لكن ما فيش
there is
أي
a
عائد
lift should be
للدولة
working
من
or
ده
facilities.
غير
There is
تغيير
no
حياة الناس.
such a
غير تغيير
return for the state,
فأنا
but to
بقول
change
تاني
the life of the
إن إحنا
people.
لابد إن
I
إحنا
say
نعمل
again, it is
ربط ما بين النمو
required
السكاني
to
والقضايا
do a
والإشكاليات
linkage
اللي قابلت
between
المجتمع
the
على مدى 100 سنة اللي فاتوا.
population growth and
ممكن دولة
with
تانية يبقى فيها النمو
the
ده ما يبقاش فيها
the
مشكلة،
long-standing
عندها
issues
موارد
for the state,
تقدر
a state
تلبي
that has
المطالب.
resources to
طب ما عندهاش،
fulfill
فالناس
their
هتبتدي
needs.
تتصرف
So
في
the
إطار
people
إمكانياتها.
would
إمكانياتها إيه؟ هي
behave
الشقة دي.
in the framework
اللي هو
of their capabilities.
لا
such an
إمكانيات.
apartment, such a
وبالتالي
house.
يبقى
As you
المجتمع
can
كله
see,
بينمو
therefore,
بشكل
the
غير
whole
مخطط وغير
society
آمن وغير
grown
إنساني،
in a
ويترتب عليه
way
تحديات
of
كبيرة جدا
unplanned,
لاستمرار
inhuman,
الدولة. وأنا بتكلم
and
الكلام ده
that
لمين؟
would
لرجال الفكر والثقافة
result in
والسياسة والإعلام.
disability. I say this to
لأن
the
أنا بسمع
scholars,
كنت
the
على
media
مدى
personnel.
السنين اللي
I
فاتت كلام كتير
heard
في التلفزيون،
throughout the
وأقرأ كتير
past
من
years
مقالات
in the media,
بتتناول الشأن العام في
reading
مصر.
the articles that tackle
لكن في فرق
the public
يعني سامحوني
matter of
بين
Egypt.
التنظير
There's a great
وبين حل
difference
المسألة.
by
اللي احنا
solving
فيه
or
ده هو
troubleshooting
يا فندم
or
حل المسألة.
just
طب اللي
took
قبل
through
مننا على
media.
مدى
But
50 سنة
before the
ما
people,
حلوش المسألة ليه؟
before throughout 50 years, why didn't
أنا
they
مش بقول كده
solve the problem?
عشان كده
I
لما أجي أتكلم في
say
قضايا أخرى
this
زي قضايا
upon
إعادة صياغة الدعم،
different
الناس بتندهش.
issues by issues
لك الله،
such
ما أنت
as
ماشي كويس.
reformulate
مش كده يا
the
دكتور مصطفى؟
surplus
ما أنت ماشي كويس والناس كلها
by
بتحبك،
saying
بتعمل كده ليه؟
to
لا لا لا،
us you
احنا
are
بنعمل كده
working
عشان
well,
نغير
why
بلدنا
you are
مش عشان الناس
doing
تحبنا.
so.
احنا
I
بنعمل
do
اللي يرضي
this
ربنا
to
سبحانه وتعالى
change the life
ونتصدى
of Egypt
القضايا.
and please the
كل الناس ما
Almighty
تتصدقش.
God and to
كل
tackle
الناس يقول لك مالكش دعوة
long-standing
بالحاجة. لا مفيش حاجة اسمها
thorny
ماليش دعوة.
issues by
أجيبها تاني عشان أقول
saying
لكم
no, you
لا.
leave this aside.
أنا
I say
النهارده
no.
اللي كان قاعد في البيت ده خد
For
شقة
those who are
ب500,000
working
جنيه.
and living in such a flat,
اديته
by living
مش أنا اللي
in a
اديته،
flat of
مصر
500,
اديته 500,000 جنيه.
at a cost of
فأنا عشان نقدر نكمل
500
الموضوع
the
لازم
Egyptian
نعيد
pound.
ترتيب
I give
وصياغة
this, I do
دعمنا اللي
not
بنقدمه للناس.
say this
هديكم
by
مثال.
myself, I say Egypt did.
احنا
Giving you an
دعمنا في
example,
السنة للدولة 275 مليار تقريبا، مش كده؟
275
275 مليار جنيه.
billion
طيب.
Egyptian pound
يعني ال
is
275 مليار جنيه دول في
support
10
is given
سنين
by the state
ب 2
by
تريليون وربع
multiplied by 10 years would be
2
equal
تريليون
to
وربع.
trillion by
كده؟
0.4
يعني
mostly.
الدكتور مصطفى بيقول لي لا
Mr.
ده انت كده
Premier
يعني
said
قول
to
الرقم
me
المظبوط. طب
by
خليه
saying
3
the
تريليون بقى.
accurate
بدل ما
figure
عايزين نقربها
make
لأقرب.
it 3 trillion
يعني
Egyptian
المبلغ
pound.
ده في 10
Such
سنين يعمل 3 تريليون تقريبا عشان نقدر نحفظ الرقم
in
بدل ما نقول
10
2
years to make 3
جماعة.
trillion Egyptian pound.
طب الرقم اللي احنا رايحين نطور بيه الريف في المصري
So the
كله.
figure to develop the
صرف صحي
country of Egypt
مية
along
شرب
with
وكهرباء
sanitation,
تبطين ترعة
drinking
حاجات كتير
water,
جدا
a lot of things,
وصحة وتعليم
health and
مسائل
education and other
هتكلفنا
issues
700
would
800
cost
مليار
us
جنيه في الثلاث سنين.
700 and
طب احنا
billion,
قعدنا
750
وارجو
billion
ان انتوا
Egyptian
تربطوا
pound.
الكلام مع بعضه،
Please
يعني يبقى في
put all the dots
فكرة
together
مبنية على بعضها.
and an
احنا
idea is
لما
built
جينا تولينا
together.
المسؤولية
When
كان
we
موجود
took
12-13%
assumed the office, we
صرف
had
صحي في الريف
12 to
يعني
13% for the
هنقول
sanitation
12.
in the country.
قلت يعني الدكتور عاصم بيقول لي
Say
11
12,
ماشي.
Dr. Asim said
طيب.
11%.
في 7 سنين و8 سنين ما قدرناش نعمل
Throughout 7 years
25
ago, we weren't able
زيادة. يعني
to
مش كده احنا 40
increase
تقريبا
it
دلوقتي.
by
فاضل 60.
25%, so it's about 40%,
تصوروا الرقم
which is
بتاع الدعم
60% is left. If
ثمنه
you
3 تريليون
imagine
جنيه
the
وتطوير
surplus
الريف
is 3
وتحويله
trillion Egyptian
إلى
pound
حاجة
and developing
تانية.
the Egyptian country to
يعني
change it
هياخد
as total would take
تقريبا
about
تلت الثمن
the
ده،
third of such
تلته.
a figure.
يعني تغير حياة أكتر
So
من
to
50
change
مليون
their life more than
ويعيشوا بشكل
50
آدمي
million
ويبقى في
Egyptian pound to
بيوتهم
live in decent
صرف وكلام
life
من هذا
and their
القبيل
houses of
ومية شرب
sanitation
آدمية
and decent
بشكل
drinking
مستمر
water
وكفاءة عالية وكهرباء
in a
زيها
full
وده وده
efficacy,
وده
the
وده.
same as
لو أنا
power. If I
أنا
took,
مش هلغي الدعم يعني
I'm
ولا
not
حاجة، ما
going to
تخافوش.
cancel the issue,
إنما هنعيد تنظيمه
but it will be re-regulated.
وأنا بتصدى
And
القضايا
I
زي
tackle
ما تصديت لي ده،
the support.
زي ما تصديت لي ده وقلت لن
I've-
أسمح إن بلدنا
I will
يبقى
not
فيها الكلام ده في
allow
مصر.
for our
لازم
state
أرتب ورق
or our
البلد دي
homeland
حتى
to
تكون
have
دولة
such
ذات شأن.
slums. So to re-regulate
كل الناس
the other issues,
تستقبل كلامي
and each
بأن
one
أنا
would
بختار الطريق
receive
الهون
my words
مش
to
السهل.
change or to
السهل إن أنا كنت
choose
أسيب الغلبة دول
the most difficult path,
شايفين؟
not the easiest one.
شايفين؟
As you can see,
ده السهل.
this is the easiest one.
زود
To
العيش
stay
شوية، زود
still,
الدعم
to
الدموي شوية،
increase the
وخلاص.
bread and surplus.
لا لا لا، احنا ما
No,
ناكلش وما نعيش كده.
no, this is not going to last.
تقول لي كل
Not to
وعيش
live
كده،
like that
ولا ما
by
تاكلش
saying
وتعيش
this.
زي ما أنا بعمل
Do
دلوقتي.
not eat
لا.
and do as
كلش
I do. No,
وعيش
I say I do
بالشكل
not eat and
الآدمي
live
المحترم
decently,
اللي احنا بنتكلم فيه.
respectively.
أنا بتكلم في القضايا
I
ومصر عليها،
tackle
مش
the
عشان
issue that I'm very
وجهة
insistent,
نظر.
not just
أنا
because I
الكلام
have
ده
a point of
قعدت
view.
50 سنة أدرسه،
I studied
أقول ليه
these
البلد دي
issues
كده؟
for the last 50 years.
ولازم البلد دي تتغير،
This should be
وأهلها
changed.
يعيشوا كما ينبغي
Their
أن يعيشوا.
people should
وبجيب
be
أمثلة
live
وبختار
as
التوقيتات
they
اللي
should
أكلم
be.
فيها
I
الناس
give the examples and I took the
والمثقفين
times and I
والمفكرين
talked
اللي كتير منهم بسمع
before.
كلامهم في التلفزيون
Intellectuals
على مدى
that a
30
lot
سنة
of
فاتوا.
them listen to
بس يا ترى لما
their
اتكلمنا كده
talks
بس حلينا
through
المسألة؟
the last 30
احنا كده
years.
بنحل المسألة.
We
يعني
did
زي
not
ما تقول
solve
البينة
the problems by
الأمارة أهي.
words. We are sorting the
الأمارة أهي.
problems
أنا بتكلم في
by
إيه؟
work. This is
إسكان.
the sign I
تعال
took
بقى نتكلم على
on the issue
شبكة
of
طرق.
housing. If
ما
we
كانش ليها حل قبل
took
كده.
on the roads network,
نتكلم
never
على
had a solution
موانئ
before.
ومطارات.
Airports,
نتكلم على
ports,
معالجة مياه وقضايا كثيرة جدا جدا.
water
احنا قاعدين
treatment
بنشتغل ربنا وحده
and
اللي يعلم.
other issues. We
والحكومة
are
زي ما قلت قبل كده
working
من
on
كم
issues and the
بتتعذب.
Almighty God is knowing and the
وهتتعذب
cabinet is
وأي
suffering
مسؤول هيشتغل
with
في
me
الدولة
and any
لازم
official
هيتعذب مش
will
عشان
work with me
العذاب
would suffer. It
لأن
isn't
ظروف
our
بلدنا
goal,
بتطلب مننا
but
إن إحنا
the
نتعذب لها
circumstances
عشان
of
نحول
our
حياة الناس
homeland is
وحياة البلد
to
ديت من لا
say to
دولة
us to change the life of
شوف أنا بقول لكم إيه،
Egypt
البلاد اللي
to
تبقى كده دي بلاد مش عايشة.
have a real
البلاد اللي
state.
زي كده
Such
دي بلاد مش شايفة.
countries live
البلاد اللي زي
like
كده
this do
دي
not
بلاد ملهاش
live,
مستقبل.
has no
الولاد
future.
اللي بتتربى في الحتت دي
Their children raising in such areas
ليه؟ لأن
would
هم ما خدوش منها حاجة.
better to destroy their land,
تطلع
so
في
their
الحياة
homelands
بالطريقة
instead.
ديت
The personality would
سامحوني أقول لكم مش هتطلع سوية وقادرة على العطاء.
would be a person that isn't able to give.
اللي بعدها طيب
Give me the new picture, what we
لما
did.
أنا اخد 3-4
Do you remember if I take 3 to 4 million families to live how in such a place is a program
فاكتر من مش 600
would take more than 600 billion trillion. Give me a bigger figures.
3 تريليون
3 trillion for
بس لازم تتنظم.
the
لازم ايه؟
surplus. We have the money, but should be regulated. People have wondered why you are talking about the bread,
ده
the
منظومة.
loaf of bread. It's in a system. Just let me say something.
50 سنة اللي فاتت
Throughout the past 50 years, too many systems were laid out upon and rearranged on the circumstances
وأوضاع موجودة في
and
الوقت ده.
status and situations who were there and upon that time.
أو نقبل إنها تستمر كده على طول.
We were not going to accept such circumstances. Give you an example of the price of the loaf of bread from 2 to 5 piastres that costs that
لما بقى من قرشين ل5 سنت
from 2 to 5 piastres cost us 18 piastres, but now it's costing us 65 piastres.
النهارده لما كان
Today,
دخل الفرد قبل
the income of the individuals before 2011 less than 400 and 500, and then reached to 2,400, the minimum low income. So we are trying
الأسعار نجابه
to
بتحسين
tackle
أحوال
the
الناس. بس خلي
prices
بالكم
increase
تحسين
by
أحوال الناس
improving the
مش
life of the
مش
people.
إنفاق بس، لا ضغط
Isn't relying
نمو
only
لأن
on
المبلغ اللي
spending
كان
but
يصرف
controlling
على
and
5 مش هينفع
regulating
يصرف على
the
10 أو
population
15.
grows because the
موارد الدولة
cost
المصرية
would change
كانت في
upon
1900
the resources of the
زادت،
Egyptian state
لكن حجم النمو السكاني اللي زاد كان
that
أكبر
was
من طاقة
increased
الإنفاق اللي موجود.
compared to
وبالتالي قيمة الجنيه
1900. Therefore, the
وزي
value
الجنيه
of the
من
Egyptian
100 سنة
pound wasn't
حاجة تانية خالص.
like
كنا بنتكلم في الوقت ده
today in
بالمليم. وارجع تاني
in
للدكتور علي
100
عشان هو
years. Back to
يدرس
Dr. Ali
دلوقتي
because he's
موضوع
studying now
الخبز.
the issue of the
برضه بتكرر
bread.
تاني أيوة
You're
أنا
repeating it
بتصفح
now. Yes, I
لقضايانا
tackle
وبستفيد من
the
فرص إن إحنا
longest
ونعرض فيها
standing
موضوعات زي كده
thorny
عشان أتكلم
issues, and I
معاكم وأقول
seize
لكم
such an
الحال
opportunity to talk
اللي احنا كنا فيه
that the
حال غير قابل
situation
للاستمرار أو
in the
النجاح
past
للدولة.
is
وبالتالي زي ما قلت كده كان
unsustainable
الرغيف حتى
and
لما
isn't
تعدل
convenient
أسعاره
for the success of the state.
كان
Even the
ب5
challenge
قروش
to
وهو
face the
بيكلف
challenge
18.
of the price
فضل
of its
ب5
bread
قروش
that
وبيكلف
was in
65.
5 piastres
طب ده
that
كلام
cost
ادي
us
واحد.
18 and
طب الاول كنا
stayed the
الدعم ده
same,
بيتقدم لقد
but
ايه؟
it costs
من
us
30
now
سنه
to
بيتقدم
65
ل 30
piastres.
مليون
That was
إنسان.
30
ولا أنا بقول كلام
years ago
مش كده يا فندم؟
provided for 30 million Egyptian citizens.
طيب يعني
But
الدكتور علي انا
Dr.
قلت من
Ali,
30 سنه
I
اتفضل
said
دكتور علي كان الدعم ده
for
بيقدم
30
ل 30
years
مليون
were provided for
دلوقتي
30
بيتقدم لقد
million,
ايه؟
but now it is
60
provided
70
for
مليون
60
يبقى انا
70
النمو
million
اللي حصل
Egyptian
والاعباء زادت على
Egyptian
حاجتين
people.
قيمه
So the
السلعه نفسها
value
زادت
of the good is being
وحجم
increased and the
المستفيدين
value of
زادوا.
the beneficiaries is
طب ده كلام
doubled.
هنقدر نستمر فيه على طول
tripled.
لما يبقى
We're not going to
120
continue
130
on the
150
same
مليون
basis if we
هتبقى
are
انت عايز
going to
تدي
be
الخبز ده
100 to
كمان
150
ل 120
million.
مليون مثلا
You're
طب
not
ده
going
مين
to
يقدر على
provide
كده؟
them the bread
طب انت
as
انا
it
هبقى موجود
is.
في الوقت ده
Am I going
لا
to
طبعا
last
مش هبقى
on
موجود
such a time?
بس انا هقول لكم على حاجه
Of course not. I say
وارجو ان احنا ننتبه للكلمه دي
something. Please pay attention.
الامانه
The interest
ان انا ابقى فاهم ايه اللي
to
هيحصل
understand what is going to happen
اللي هيحصل واتعامل معاه
and
وكانه
to
حصل
deal with it as it
لكن لو انا
happens.
قلت انا مش
But
هبقى موجود
if
في
I
الوقت
say if I'm
دوت
not going to
واللي موجودين ربنا
stay upon
يوفقهم
the
وانا
time
كنت
and
شايف
who are going to take
وفاهم
my
اللي
place,
هيحصل للبلد دي
God held them.
بالطريقه اللي
But
احنا ماشيين بيها دي
when I
ربنا
was
يحاسبني
saying it
يقول لي انت كنت فاهم وساكت ليه؟
the outlook,
هيقول لك
I'll
كنت
be
فاهم وساكت
carefully,
ليه؟
be
هقول له يا دكتور مصطفى
responsible
اصل كنت عايز
and
استمر
held accountable
كنت عايز
before the
افضل على الكرسي على طول
Almighty
يعني
God.
فلازم ايه؟
I'm not going to say that I want
خلي
to
بالي
be last on
هيقول
my
لي
office.
الكرسي ده انا
Such
اللي جبتك
a
فيه
post,
وانا اللي همشيك منه
I
مالك الملك يؤتي
blessed
الملك من
you
يشاء وينزع الملك
and
ممن
you
يشاء
are going
محدش
to
بيجيب حد
finish the
ومحدش بيمشي
post
حد طب
by
انت عملت
the
كده
will
ليه؟
of me,
اقول له
of
ايه
the
ساعتها؟
will of the Almighty God.
فالامانه تقتضي مني اللي انا فاهمه وشايفه لازم اتصدى ليه
I should
واحله
tackle what
انا
I
قلت بس
see.
فرصه ان احنا
I
نشوف
said it is an
ده
opportunity to
بالمناسبة
look at.
احنا
By the
برنامجنا
way,
في
our
في رفع
program
الكفاءة
in
وتحسين أحوال الناس
elevating the
مستمر
efficiency and
لأن
improving
الحجم
the life of
الجهد
the people
المطلوب
is
ضخم جدا
sustainable because
وحجم
the
المطلوب كبير
value
وزي ما انتم شايفين
of the
بنخش
effort
من مكان
is
لمكان من
big.
مكان
As
لمكان
you can see, we
نحسن من ده
enter
لده
from each
أرجو إني ما
place
أكونش
to the
قطرت
other to
عليكم وخدت
improving.
وقت كتير بس كان لابد
hope I
أسجل
was short,
أسجل إن
but
البلد
I need to
مستقبل
record
البلاد
that
مش
the
كلام
future of
ومش
our homeland isn't
لا
just
جهد
words
وعرق
but effort
جهد وعرق وتضحية
and
عشان
is
الأجيال
sacrifice
الصغيرة اللي
for
انتوا
the
تسمعوها
upcoming
دي
generation
تعيش ويبقى ليها
to
مستقبل
live and
شكرا
have
جزيلا
a future. Thank you very much.
مسيرة عمرانية
A construction
ليس
path,
مجرد عنوان
just
فيلم سنشاهده بعد لحظات،
title
ولكنه
of a short
حقيقة تبنتها
film,
مصر
but it
يوما
is
تلو الآخر
a reality
بإصرار
adapted by
وعزم
Egypt all the
واجتهاد.
time,
دعونا
depending
نتعرف على
on
ملامح هذه
determination and
المسيرة
effort.
من
Let's
خلال فيلم
look at
تسجيلي من إنتاج
the
إدارة
features of
الشؤون
such a
المعنوية
path
بعنوان
produced by
مسيرة
the
عمرانية.
Moral Matters Authority under the title of A Construction Path.
مفيش حق أغلى من بسمة صافية بعد طول حزن وألم،
The precious
ولا حق
smile
أغلى من حقوق البشر في الحياة.
compared to the life and the rights of
بالعدل
the
والمساواة
people
وتكافؤ
by
الفرص، بالأمن
just
والأمان،
equality, peace and
بالسكينة والسكن
security.
داخل وطن واحد بيضمنا. ابتدينا رحلة
We
الأمل
started the path
والعمل
of hope and
والإنجازات.
work and achievements.
القرار تحقيق نهضة
Resolution to
حضارية،
achieve a civilized renaissance.
والبداية
The
كانت
beginning
مسيرة
was
عمرانية.
a construction path.
اتكلمنا في الاسكان، ودي كانت احد الاشكالات اللي بتقابل مصر، وافرزت حجم من العشوائيات في التمدد العمراني. وبالتالي احنا قلنا لا، هنخش كدوله هنعمل حاجتين. هنعمل اسكان لكل الطبقات، في الاسكان الاجتماعي وفي الاسكان المتوسط وفوق المتوسط. احنا ما حطيناش سكن شقه، احنا حطينا مجتمع.
كان التحدي فوق التصور، وأزمة الإسكان كانت كل يوم بتكبر، وكان التغلب عليها قرار برد الاعتبار لملايين من شعب مصر. خريطة أمل أطلقتها القيادة السياسية قبل 7 سنوات، وقدرنا نبني أكتر من 1.5 مليون وحدة سكنية، وفي طريقنا نوصل البناء ل2.240.000 وحدة سكنية، من إسكان اجتماعي ومتوسط ومتميز، وإسكان بديل للعشوائيات في جميع محافظات مصر. وأنشأنا في مدينة بدر مجتمع عمراني جديد بيضم 10,055 عمارة بإجمالي 25,320 وحدة سكنية ضمن مشروعات الإسكان الاجتماعي وسكن مصر. في مدينة العبور الجديدة، إحدى مدن الجيل الرابع، انتهينا من إنشاء 451 عمارة سكنية بإجمالي 10,824 وحدة ضمن مشروع الإسكان الاجتماعي. وكمان 29 عمارة سكنية بتضم 696 وحدة ضمن مشروع سكن مصر من إجمالي 130 عمارة. وبتستمر حركة البناء والعمران في مدينة 15 مايو بإنشاء 126 عمارة بإجمالي 2,772 وحدة سكنية بمناطق مايو وزهور مايو. وفي مدينة القاهرة الجديدة تم إنشاء 205 عمارة بإجمالي 4,668 وحدة سكنية ضمن إسكان جنة وسكن مصر. وتستمر ملحمة البناء والنماء بتوفير سكن كريم للمواطن المصري.
أول كنا قاعدين في 7 أسر في أوضة صغيرة، الوقت الحمد لله رب العالمين أعطانا شقة واسعة، أوضتين وصالة وحمام ومطبخ يعني يجري فيها الخيل فوق الممتاز.
شقق جميلة ونظيفة وتشطيب نظيف وحاجة يعني ينفع الواحد يعيش فيها كويس. الحياة اتغيرت من الأوحش للأحسن.
صورة حضارية مشرقة لتسهيل حياة الناس. بالعزم والإصرار بنفتتح كل يوم طاقة نهار، وبالتنمية والأمن والأمان بنضمن حقوق الإنسان.
ولسه نفضل نشتغل ونشتغل ونشتغل حتى نغير واقعنا.
اسلمي يا مصر إنني الفدا، ولتظلي جنة وسرمدا. دامت سماؤك بردا وسلاما، للنعيم موطنا وموعدا. لك يا مصر السلامة وسلاما يا بلادي. إن رمى الدهر سهامه أتقيها بفؤادي، واسلمي في كل حين.
مشروعات حيوية.
Vital projects that affirms the will of the Egyptian state in building the human citizen and achievement the dignity for each of them. Ministry of Housing is keen to provide construction houses, constructive and housing projects. Upon this project, Dr. Azam Al-Ghazar, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Communities would have this speech. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most passionate, Your Excellency, Mr. President, the President of the Republic, ladies and gentlemen, and happy many returns. Allow me, sir, today we'll be having a great talk upon housing and construction development. Will represent the effort of the state of housing sectors in Eastern Cairo. Allow me, as His Excellency, Mr. President, talk upon the concept of the affordable housing as named by the United Nations, or which is the right of the human rights. The state used to tackle such an issue. The issue of housing is upon the demand and supply. Previously talked on the only one side, which is the offer to build or to produce a housing unit regardless of the shape of the constructive output. In the beginning, we worked on the both sides, demand and supply, and on different features of two parts. By issuing the housing, societal housing law, which is the great umbrella that regulated the relationship and secured the possession of the citizen of an affordable housing. It was the same before, but ineffective. The issue here that is linked to the economic capabilities. Therefore, we had a default in the provision of the affordable housing. We worked in the first element with choosing the location, so that was one of the reasons to the unsuccessful housing project. By choosing the location need to work and the main civilized centers in order to avoid the housing of a worker where he works or her work. Before starting the presentation, to have the citizen a close look of housing or working opportunities by giving the examples. When we remove or transform Al-Dibar to Al-Rubeki, 1,700 housing units were provided for Al-Rubaiki area and have some sort of a connection between where they work and where they live in order to avoid what is named of the relocation. Regardless, to look at the social sides. And the other part, the collection by the roads and means of transportation, which is very important to have the system of housing succeeded. And it is a great part of a success. If we have unconnected construction and unlinked properly, if we had no means of public transport, which is the main of mobility in the developed countries, not just the private car, that reflect the concern of the state to develop the roads network, and by entering new public transport, by the subways in all phases and the monorail. All these elements are undergoing to serve the issue, as said by His Excellency, Mr. President, not to provide a housing unit. It is a bigger issue, not just to provide a housing only. On the level of the locations, we're talking about integrated infrastructure locations served properly, networks of electricity, communications, Wi-Fi's, fire network, which are very important for the citizen, that is required for the sustainable construction requirement, such as social, health and education services. It isn't but to provide a housing unity. The total cost, how many percentage to be undergoing for the new urban communities, and the expenses on the other component, in order to know it is about a system, not just a housing unit. It's location to provide a healthy environment and safety, to create no internal vacuums, and to increase the life of the citizen. So the citizen should rely on the friendly means of transportation in order to maintain the quality and the health of the citizen. If we move to the other point, which is the designing of the building and the housing unit, the state in such a context to provide different constructive designs that to be convenient for the traditions of the Egyptian citizens without any discrimination. This is the alternative building for the other dangerous areas, such as housing, social housing in Al-Alamein, middle-class housing in the new Cairo, the new administrative capitals. Therefore, whoever is living there should not discriminate the types of the people. A housing for each citizen, for all Egyptians, without any class discrimination, without anything to describe the level of the people, as directed by His Excellency Mr. President and his initiative. We're not going to have an apartment of one living room and one bedroom. At least to have 2 to 3 rooms and living room, but all units would contain 3 bedrooms and living room. Not just the design, and it's a space. It's in a full furnished and that is distinctive without any discrimination and on high quality level, to be handed over for the families fully furnished. That would create the biggest cultural and societal movement for a good citizen that has a loyalty and belonging to their homelands. The management of construction in the social housing, a part of the endowment is a deposit for the maintenance, and the state has established big companies to manage the sustainable construction and the provision of maintenance for all projects, in order to avoid full 5 to 7 years to be a collapsed construction, and as well as the provision of diverse economic activities to regain or to reinvest the income on other service activities located in such areas. If we move upon to the side of demand, we work in 3 pivots. The first one is the forms of the financial support in the framework. The state is providing from 5 to 6,000 Egyptian pounds accordingly. That in total of 250 to 300,000 Egyptian pounds. Such units do not calculate the cost of the land, facilities, compensations, as well as supporting the rate. Therefore, what is paid by the citizen in the units of the housing unit does not represent more than 40 to 50% of the actual cost. So we're talking on the social housing, but for the alternative housing is for free. The incapability of the citizen to possess such an ability, even if its cost is only 50% of the cost. Many mechanisms and regulations were put to encourage the real estate mortgage that led 8 financial constitutions to support these buildings of a total that reached 38 billion Egyptian pounds of real estate mortgage, that more than 300 beneficiaries. The main initiatives of supporting the rates of the real estate mortgage that had a big step when the announced rate were 20%, the financial funding is 30%. His Excellency, Mr. President has launched recently 3% of rate that requires the demand in housing is effective, that the citizen, as said by His Excellency, Mr. President, if anyone would wish to possess or to own a flat would have it. The national strategy of housing, as said by His Excellency, Mr. President, that by saying we've solved the problem in a day or night. No, it is a result of a great analysis and looking at the issue of different angles that has three main dimensions were studied completely. Therefore, the issue were solved. The quality of housing, the quality of living, which is a part paid by the state at large. We had a yearly increase of population from 2 to 20.5% a year. That requires 350,000 housing to be provided. Not the state would do it as a whole, but according to the levels of housing not paid attention by the private sector. In addition to 500 to 600 housing units that is required a year, created a gap till 2014 that lead to 2.5 million housing units that led to develop the unplanned areas. We have 150,000 unplanned areas that would increase the demand on housing units. Such segmentation, as indicated by Mr. President, from 76 to 2005 was produced 1.5 million, and by a rate 83 million, 8,300 housing units, which is 5 doubles of the previous rate. Let me stop here. This is a direct unit produced by the country. Other indirect housing units, with the partnership of the private sector, we're taking the ratio of the state that will provide 150,000 housing units in addition to the allocations of pieces of land, would make it the 10th double of what have been made by the state previously. Different initiatives, the initiative of housing, social housing, the plan of developing the unplanned and dangerous areas, as indicated by His Excellency Mr. President, we've already finished 250,000, and the issue of, let me just clear up a point, to eradicate the dangerous areas being done already, even for the people is waiting to rehouse them in Maspero. Currently they are in safety places and provided by rental issues until relocated in the same areas for 3 years, or for the period to be relocated till the return. The issue for housing for all Egyptians and developing the capitals of the governorate, aside of what is being done for the distinguished housing and other areas. 1.5 million housing units distributed as follows. Housing, social housing will taken by 77%. Social housing is 52%, and the alternative housing for the slums take the rest, regardless of what has been executed by the engineering authority of the armed forces in other governorates, such as in the last million. That is target 2,240,000 in 2024. We've already been talking about the the quantity dimension, not just to provide a housing unit, but to have a just in distributing the segmentation, improving the quality of life as well as the quality of the housing. Just in the provision of the housing before 2014, the state effort will focus in programs of national project, which is the family housing, developed housing, and the national program, which this was the form and the shape of the output. The state was only focused on such segmentation. Our strategy now is relying on 3 pillars: subsidies, support, and the availability. Supporting the low income by establishing the affordable housing units to eradicate the dangerous areas and the provision of our people used to live in such areas. As we've pointed out, it's a full support as the dangerous areas will be built for free, and the housing or the social housing would let the people pay to 40 to 50% of the cost of the house. In order to have a collection of such segmentations be a prey for the demands of the market, and the state has entered by supporting such a sector by the provision of housing such as Darmas. The availability of the high income provided in different cities that provide resources of developing social projects and developing the dangerous areas. I'd like to highlight new issues raised by the people. Why we are building such luxury houses by saying that each citizen has a right upon the state according to their nature, their capabilities. If we're not giving them their rights, we'll build their convenient housing in other countries, and I think it is in a great role of the state as it does not represent something related to luxury. We are executing projects for the interest for other segmentation to be moved. If we are talking about improving the quality of life, we're not talking about just a housing unit. We are talking about the quality of life for a raising citizen to be a support of such a state and work on their development. I apologize for the repetitive pictures by showing the quality of life before and after. As we said, the state does not differentiate between the citizens according to their income or economic level. They provide the affordable housing unit. These the rights of the human right. These pictures before and after in areas such as Al Sayadin, Tel El Qarib, Aguz, October Gardens, the alternative housings. The third area with no in-city relocations. We cannot rebuild in dangerous areas, so they are moved in other areas such as in October by choosing the location and sites is related at large to their activities related in a relation to Hadabat al-Ahram, means of transportation, ART, that cross these areas, that translate our words in by choosing the sites of construction. People do not live in the same areas. They are moved in societies such as the alternative housing in Asmarat, Bashair al-Khair, al-Mahrousa. These areas are integrated of services and facilities, provide services, not just places for practicing sport activities, but also training program with Ministry of Solidarization to raise then their level of qualifications in order to have them opportunities to change their activities by creating new economic activities. These areas that are not good for relocation would give us a chance, an opportunity when we remove an area such as Ain al-Haya lake to make such an interment area that raise the economic values for the surrounding construction. It's built by the state. The value of such units were doubled, at least 2.5 by the construction or real estate developers. People bought it and left aside their values because of the development were doubled. Because of the work of development do not reflect on only the citizens that was or were removed by, but reflect on the surrounding construction made by the project. You can see in front of it Al Khayala project that created the same status of improving the construction that was named by the construction expert the succession process. The prices of the lands were increased and the circles of development will be expanded surrounding the estimated areas. Maspero area, we're talking about the improvement of life. People do not look at the quality of their life. The state outlook to the place upon developing and after developing. When we develop the alternative housing will develop it in the same shape of the surrounding construction. When develop Al Madabar area, these the pictures of the site, the location will be ended, God willing, as said by His Excellency Mr. President at the end of this year. Magra Al Ayun area, their housing, that's in the convenient with the nature of the area historically. The level of construction does not look at the economic level, which is the integration in sorting out the problem of or the issue of housing. Developing the housing itself, as you can see, before and after, provided by the government in 2014, and on the left side what has been provided by now. There is a model of before 2014 and social housing in the new Mansoura governorate, the middle class housing provided before, and the other picture of Ghana and Dar Masr. It is distinguished housing. We've never moved to the most distinguished housing, such as Abrag Al Alamin and the fifth settlement. We're talking about the distinguished housing. To improve the housing unit is linked to the finishing. As you can see in this picture, for the alternative housing in Maspero triangle area, for example, equality of materials and diversity of the shape or the finishing by the citizen. The third dimension of the housing issue, which is related to the place, we're not focusing on a work in one site. A citizen do not wish to live in. We are announcing according to the applicants we are working on, we'll find 47% provided by the social housing, and the alternative housing is focused on the Great Cairo, according to the dangerous and unplanned areas. But the place distribution is disseminated throughout the capital. If we move on to our project in Eastern Cairo, God willing, we are honored the presence of His Excellency Mr. President to inaugurate the social housing, middle class housing, a great spot upon the efforts of the Ministry of Housing of the Eastern Cairo sector. We have 10 new cities, 6 of the existed one and 4 of new cities, therefore the fourth generation housing. The volume of the cost in 2014 is 111 billion Egyptian pounds, which indicates what has been clarified by His Excellency Mr. President, that we are not working only on the fourth generation project and leaving the others. We are working in all directions. The other fourth generations that been allocated of the 14 billion Egyptian pounds, it's not a simple one or a moderate to be spent in 4 years. The total of the spent was 1.5 billion Egyptian pounds on a city such as Hadabat Asyut, Tagamma Nasser. The presidential decrees of 2017 throughout 4 years was 3.9 billion Egyptian pounds. That was the double of being spent in 30 years. The 111 billion Egyptian pound is distributed upon the formation of 62 billion Egyptian pounds, 54 to 55% of the total value on the housing section. But the 45% of the 11 billion on the section of services. It's not the issue of housing unit, or it is the issue of construction development. Badr City, what we spent in 2014 was 22.5 billion Egyptian pounds, 15 of which on the housing and the rest on the integrated sections, and God willing, we are inaugurated 47,876 housing units on 3 locations, and others made by the engineering authority were provided to start the inauguration on the housing for the workers moving to the new administrative capital of 24,000 housing units, and the second phase of the housing of the social housing will be 14,000 and more housing units on the northern extension of Badr City, and the worker housing, its first phase will finish as Your Excellency directed. We are working upon the second phase of 4,704 housing units, and God willing will be finished at the end of this year. These were the projects of the workers moving to the new capital at the cost of 3.2 billion Egyptian pound. As you can see, the building of 24 apartments of 3 rooms and a living room and services of a total space of 118 square meter. There is a model of the furniture. The second project of the social housing of Badr City, 14,000 housing unit of a total cost of 109 billion Egyptian pound, executed by the Engineering Authority of the Armed Forces of 6th floor. The building, 24 apartments of a total space of 90 square meters. The second project of the social, 3,000 and more housing units at a total cost of 150 million Egyptian pound. 24 apartments of a building, 3 rooms and 1 living room of a total space of 90 square meters. The other project in the 15th Mayu district or city, 7.8 billion Egyptian pounds were spent. We'll always see that the housing section will represent 50 to 60%, and the other part would represent the other activities. We'll be having an inauguration of 27 or 2,772 housing units of the first location of 115,000 housing units at a total cost of 350 billion Egyptian pounds. We are working on average and moderate highest, not to avoid a great number or a large number of units of a building. Dar Masr of 15th Mayu city, or at a total cost of 300 billion Egyptian pound. A building, 24 apartments of the third location of the new Cairo. What is being spent is 28 billion Egyptian pound. As you can see, 50% on the housing unit and the other 50% on the other sectors. In 3 relocations, the first one, housing project of Ghana in New Cairo. The second project of Al-Andalus, at the west of the university, at a cost of 700 million Egyptian pound. The third project, the second Masr, the northern of Al-Sukhna Road, 1,400 and above housing units at a total cost of 500 million Egyptian pound. Al-Abur city, what has been spent upon is 13 billion Egyptian pound. As you can see, the new Al-Abur city, the volume of the spending on the housing is the highest because it is a city of the 4th generation cities, which is a great, it's a very important point. We used to work in a very early phase where less cost, even compared to the new cities. If I need to develop an existed construction, the cost of a unit and its affiliation to 3 doubled of what have been spent on the new cities to build 3 units in a new urban community. Better for me to develop a unit in the existed ones. The new Al-Abur city, we had 11,520 housing units of the first project at a 10,000 at a cost of 2.2 billion Egyptian pound. The space of a unit is 63 square meters. The second project of second Masr will be have at a cost of 105 million Egyptian pound. Allow me, Your Excellency, Mr. President, to move upon the inauguration through video conference. We've chosen a set of projects. The first project of the social housing of 15th May City to be inaugurated. Engineer Mina Rafat, and Engineer Ali, the supervisor of the project. Any orders, sir? The second project, the middle class housing of Dar Masr at 15th May City, 63 building. Engineer Mohammed Khalaf, Deputy President of the authority, will open or inaugurate the project. Any orders, sir? Thank you. The project to open the first phase of the social housing of Badr City, 155 buildings out of a total 8,000 housing units. Amir Abdelghaffar, an engineer, will open, and Engineer Mansour Abdelaziz, the supervisor of the project. Any orders, sir? Thank you. The fourth project to open second Masr project of 62 buildings of a total 1,400 buildings to be opened. The supervisors of the project. Any orders there? Thank you.
second
Masr of New Badr City, 29 buildings, 600 and more housing units. Engineer Walid Abdelaziz, the General Supervisor of Housing, and Engineer Mohammed Khattab, a project supervisor.
اي اوامر يا فندم.
Any orders, sir? Thank you.
اي اوامر يا فندم.
Any orders, sir?
شكرا دكتور عاصم.
Thanks, Dr. Asim.
عايز
I
اشاور
would like to
عليها
highlight a
إن
point
وزارة
here.
الإسكان وهيئة
The Ministry of
المجتمعات
Housing and Urban
الهدف من
Community,
الجهد اللي هي
its
بتبذله
goal
في
of
تم
their
طرحه ده
effort
خلال
of being
الفترة اللي فاتت بالكامل
presented and
هو مش
provided
برضه عشان تبقى
before
الرسالة دي
recently
واصلة مش منافسة
isn't
للقطاع
a
الخاص
confrontation
ولكن هي
with
الفكرة
the
محاولة
private sector, but the
لعمل
idea was
توازن
an
ما بين
attempt to make a balance
المطلوب
between
على مستوى الدولة بالكامل
the
وبين اللي بيتم
demand
إتاحته زي ما
and
تم
the
شرحه.
supply at
بس
the
أنا
level
هنا
of the
هشار على
state, as
نقطتين مهمين
explained.
قوي قوي.
To highlight two
النهارده
points,
حرصت
the
عليهم
state
خلال
was
الفترة
very
الأخيرة يا
keen
دكتور مصطفى
recently
إن النهارده
that
اتطور أسلوبنا في التعامل
our style has been developed
مطورين القطاع
in
الخاص وقلنا لهم خدوا
dealing with
أراضي
the real estate
تدفعوش
developer by give them
ثمن الأرض ولكن ادفعوا
land,
ثمن
do
الأرض
not pay the price, but
والهدف من ده كان عشان
pay
نوفر
through
لهم
the housing unit. The main was
من
just
غير ما
to
يدفعوا قدامنا
allocate
حاجة
them
ويبتدوا يطوروا على طول
lands
وفي أقرب
for free and start to
وقت ممكن
build
عشان
to
يتيحوا ده
establish in a
للمواطنين يعني. النقطة الثانية إن
as soon
الدولة
as possible
في كل
to
مشروعات الإسكان
provide for the
اللي
citizens. The second
هي ما
point,
بتقدمش إسكان
the state do not
نص تشطيب
provide
وده أمر أنا بقوله عشان تبقى الأمور واضحة.
finished
يعني
or
الكلام اللي
finished
بيتم عرضه
housing
دلوقتي والسنين
unit.
اللي فاتت كمان
What
هو
is being
إسكان
dealt
كامل التشطيب
before
ما بيتمش افتتاحه إلا زي ما انتوا شفتوه كده. يعني لو
just
خرجنا من
to
هنا على أي مكان من
provide
الأماكن اللي تم افتتاحها
furnished
هي جاهزة
housing
لاستقبال الناس
that is
انها تعيش
full
بشكل كويس.
ready to
لا
receive the
محتاج
people
يوضب
to
شقته
live properly. You do
ولا
not need
الطريق اللي واصل لهذا
to make any
العقار او
changes
البيت
or
محتاج يتسفلت ولا اذا كان في مناطق خدمات عايزه
having
هتتعمل
a
في
lack of
السنين اللي بعد كده.
pavement
لا احنا بنتكلم
in the
على ان
roads, but we
المشروع
are talking
ما دام بيفتتح
about the
كده هو
project
حاجته
upon
كلها
their
كامله وجاهزه
inaugurations
لاستقبال
of
الناس.
that
وانا بقول
has
الكلام
the
دوت عشان
full
في نقطه مهمه جدا
services around
ان
it.
احنا حرصنا
that we
كدولة على ان
were
احنا
very
نشجع
keen
القطاع
as state
الخاص
to
على ان هو
encourage the private sector
يطور
to develop the
وكمان يطور
performance.
اداؤه يعني ايه؟ يعني ان هو يعني يطلع منتج كامل التشطيب. وانا بقول الكلام دوت لان ده هدف الدوله دلوقتي ان احنا
because
دكتور
it is
مصطفى
the
ما
goal of
نسمحش
the
ان في
state right now,
وحدات
as I
يتم
say
طرحها
to
داخل
Dr.
الدوله
Mustafa, not to allow
نص تشطيب.
any
ليه بقول كده؟
housing units
عشان احنا
without
عايزين ندي
any
فرص عمل للناس
finishing.
لان اللي هيعمل كده
Just to
وهيقدم الوحدات
give
كامله التشطيب
an
اي مكان
opportunity
مستواها
for the
بقى من
people
مستوى
regardless of
متوسط
their
لغايه
class or
اعلى حاجه يعني.
their level,
لكن في النهايه بقى
ranging
البيت بقى
between
المكان بقى
middle to the
المنطقه اللي
highest,
تم
but
تطويرها
ultimately
هي
the
جاهزه وقابله
developed
للحياه.
area is
لكن مش معقول اخش نص تشطيب
ready
انا اخد البيت
viable.
بتاعي اوضبه وبعد حد تاني بعدها ب6 شهور او سنه يوضب بيته
not to
بعدها
give
بسنتين
them
حد تالت. عمر ما هيبقى
houses
في
to
سكن
be
بمعنى كلمه
developed
سكن للناس.
throughout
دي نقطة.
the
النقطة
upcoming
الثانية
years.
ان احنا لما قلنا
This is
نوفر
one point. The second point, once we've said to
الأرض
provide the
للمطورين في
land
مقابل ان
for
هو
the developer
يعطي
in return
وحدات
of to
سكنية
give
كنا
housing
بنقول
units,
زي ما بقول كده
as I
بزود
say,
ملاءة
to
عملية للمطورين
increase
عشان حجم المعروض يزيد. ولما
finance
حجم المعروض يزيد
coverage for the
مع
developers
المبادرات
to
اللي احنا عملناها
increase the
بتاعت ان احنا بنقول 3 سنين
supply
3%
by saying
احنا كان عندنا 100 مليار
3%, we've
مش كده يا
already
دكتور مصطفى؟
crossed
100 مليار بنقول ان
1
احنا
billion
هنضخهم
Egyptian pound to be pumped
لتمويل هذا
or to be
النوع
flowed
من الاسكان عشان نزود مساحه.
to
ما هو انا اقدر
support or
ادفع
to
قسط على
fundraise
5
such
سنين
a type of
وغيري يقدر
housing.
يدفع على 10 سنين.
I can
احنا خليناها كام؟
pay
30
a
سنه
down
اللي هو
payment
اكنك
from
بتدفع
5 to
إيجار.
6
ده اللي احنا قلنا
to
عشان
7 years,
نقلل
but we've made it
يعني
to
قيمة
do
القسط على الناس عشان
30
الإتاحة تبقى الأكبر حجم
years to have
من
more
المواطنين
availability
يتبقى شيء ان
for
احنا
the
أنا قلت
largest
من
scale of the citizens.
شهر تقريبا لو سمحتم الإعلان والإعلان عن أي سكن لابد أن يكون خلصان 30%. مش كده يا دكتور طب احنا قلنا كده ليه؟
anyhow
عشان بس
they
ما حدش
do
يتصور
have at
ان هو
least
شكل من اشكال
30%
الاعاقه.
of
لا احنا مش بنعمل الاعاقه للناس، احنا عايزين
provided
كدوله
candidates.
مسؤوله
We
على ان هي
want
تامن
as a responsible
اموال
state
البشر،
to
مش كده يا دكتور عاصم؟
secure
يعني النهارده انا
monies
مواطن
of the
بسمع
people
على ان
as a
في
citizen.
اعلان
Listen
في
or
التلفزيون
heard
او في
that there is
الجورنال
an
على ان في وحده سكنيه
announcement that there is
هقدم
a
لها
housing unit
واخدها، ويكون لسه المطور لسه ما
submit my
اشتغلش
applications,
في الارض.
but the
فاحنا قلنا لا،
developer or the real estate
نطمن
developer
الناس
never
لان احنا مسؤولين
started
كدوله
do their basis
على ان احنا
as responsible
يعني
and
ان الكلام
officials
اللي بيبقى
of
ماشي
the
الدوله بتبقى قاعده
state.
مش بتتفرج.
We are not
الدولة ما
just
بتتفرجش، الدولة
watching.
بتنظم
The
وبتسيطر
state
وتضمن
isn't watching.
حقوق
The
الناس.
state is
والا هيبقى في
regulating and
مشكلة. إن
securing
احنا نقول
rights of the
الشقة دي
people.
هتاخدها بعد 5 سنين
Otherwise, we'll
وتاخدها
have a
بعد 10
problem
سنين.
that by saying
ده مش
that the
مناسب لينا،
flat or the
وعايزين
apartment
نرتقي
will
بأدائنا
be handed
كلنا
over to
سواء
the
كانت هيئة
people
المجتمعات أو القطاع
after
الخاص.
5 years,
يتبقى
and
نقطة تانية أنا
then
عايز أقولها للدكتور
will
عاصم ما قالهاش.
receive after 10 years. One more
العالمين
point.
والعاصمة.
العالمين and
دكتور
the
عاصم
new
كان بيتكلم
capitals
على
as
موازنات من عنده،
said
صح؟
by Dr. Asim to mentioned
هل
budget.
العاصمة
Does the
قرش
new capital
من الدولة؟ طب أنا هقول لكم على حاجة.
that cost
احنا عاملين حسابنا
penny
إن العاصمة
from the
تدخل
state
البورصة إن شاء الله في
say
أقرب فرصة
something.
دكتور مصطفى،
We are
وهيكون
planning
الملاءة المالية اللي موجودة
the new
في صندوق
capital will be
الشركة.
into the stock and
كام يا
the
دكتور مصطفى؟
financial coverage will be by
احنا
the
بنتكلم على أموال سايلة 100 مليار
company.
جنيه.
We are talking about
شركة إيه؟
100 billion
العاصمة.
pounds
ده حاجة موضوع ملوش
made
علاقة خالص
provided by the company of
بهيئة
the
المجتمعات.
capital that
لا لا
has
لا لا.
nothing to do
دي فكرة
with the
تانية
urban
خالص في إدارة
community. It's a
قدراتنا
new idea
وإدارة
of
مشاريعنا.
managing
هو
our
هنوفر ده بس الدولة مش هتدفع
capabilities
قرش.
and potentials.
بل بالعكس.
But we will provide
العاصمة هيبقى
this,
يعني
but
لو
without
خلال
any
السنتين الجايين
cost
دول بفضل
at
الله
the
سبحانه وتعالى
state. But the
التصور اللي
company
احنا
of the
عاملينه
capitals
إنها
got
تدخل
willing through 2 years
تقدم
according to
في
our
البورصة.
clock
أنا بقول
that
هيكون أصولها
the
تتعدى
assets
3-4
will
تريليون
be
جنيه.
overcome 3 to 4
خلي بالكم
billion
الكلام ده ينطبق على
trillion
العالمين
Egyptian
وينطبق
pounds.
على
This
مناطق
is
أخرى أو
relying
مدن
on
أخرى شغالين
العالمين
فيها
and
بالفكرة
other
دي
new
عشان بس الناس تبقى
cities
فاهمة
based on
الموضوع
such an
إن برضه
idea
هم
or a concept.
حاولوا يشوشوا على
The issue
الناس
that people
خلال
try
السنين اللي
to
فاتت بان ده الدوله بتدفع فلوس وسايبه لا 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 لا
mislead the people
أخرى
that the state is paying money.
اللي
No,
احنا عايزين نعملها
that
ولا ما
isn't the
كناش قادرين
truth.
نحقق اللي احنا فيه.
Otherwise, we
إن
won't
احنا لو
be
كنا
able to
ماشيين على ان
do
دي
what we've
موازنه الدوله
done.
فقط
That
صدقوني مش
if
ممكن.
we relied
فالعاصمة
only on
شغالة
the budget of the
والعالمين
state, the
ومدن
capital,
أخرى
and
موازنة
Al-Alamin
الدولة
and
لم
other
تمس فيها
cities,
ولم تقدم
the
لها قرش. طب
state's
بس
budget
كده؟
never
لا.
paid a penny.
بقول لكم
This
النهارده
isn't the
ممكن
whole case.
شركة العاصمة
I
خلال سنتين
say
بالكتير
that the capital
تقدم ويبقى
of
القوائم المالية
the
القوائم المالية
company
بتاعت
is
الشركة
entering the
فيها
stock
100 مليار جنيه أموال سائلة
will
فين؟
happen.
في البنوك. مش كده يا
full
دكتور عاصم؟
coverage of
ده اللي
the
احنا ده
company
حد كان يحلم بكده؟
in
ما
the
بنعمل ده
banks.
كله
We never dreamed of
في
such a
العاصمة
thing.
وكمان
This
معانا
will
100
be
مليار جنيه على جنب
doing this in the
ومعانا
capital
2-3
and we have a
تريليون أصول
reserve
موجودة في الأرض
3
في العاصمة. مش
billion
كده؟
Egyptian
لا.
pound.
ده مسار الدولة
The
عملته
path of a state
في إعادة
being
بناء
laid out in rebuilding
وصياغة
and
إمكانياتها.
refill for
إحنا ماسكين كل حاجة.
regulate its
ماسكين كل حاجة.
potentials. We are
شكراً جزيلاً.
controlling on everything. Thank you very
سيادة
much.
الرئيس،
Thanks, Mr.
بنستأذن
President.
حضرتك
Mr.
في
President
جولة
will
تفقدية
excuse
إذانا
us
بافتتاح باقي
having a
المشروعات
tour
السكنية. تفضل.
of inspection and opening the project. Please, sir.
مش ضعيفة لا عافية، عشت فيها وسكنة فيا. مصر جاية، مصر جاية بالايدين المصراوية، شايلة كل الخير معاها، املا كل الدنيا دي. مصر جاية، مصر جاية، مصر جاية، مصر جاية مش فقيرة لا غنية، بالحبايب والقرايب والحكاوي والغناوي والمصانع والمدارس، واللي زارع واللي حارس، هي أحلى صورة لينا.
أحرزت الدولة المصرية تقدما ملحوظا في مسيرة
The
التنمية،
Egyptian state made a great step and tangible development in the field of housing that pay great concern for the Egyptian citizen. And now we are here at the housing of the workers of the new Badr City. Dr. Asim Al-Gaddar, Minister of Housing and Urban Communities, is offered to talk a lot about the project to be inaugurated today. We'd like to highlight you, Mr. Minister, on the importance of the workers' housing of the new capital for the new workers and its impact, and to have some sort of facilitating the workers' job and mobilizations in the new capitals. As we all know that Badr City is away from the new capital of 15 minutes on the Al Suez Road. Therefore, we are inaugurating the first phase of the housing assigned to our colleagues are going to be moved in the new capital. At the end of this year, we'll open the second phase. The first phase of 9,024 housing units, and then, but the presence of the people near their work locations will ease a lot. So if the commute will take a lot of space, will be exhausted. Therefore, the state, when thought by facilitating the work and mobilization for our colleagues who work into the project or to the new capital, therefore we've already thought about making flats for 118 space of square meter to support or fundraising the rate of the real estate mortgage, to have more incentive for the workers moving to the new capitals, and to have more easier for them. Mr. Minister, such a mega national project of housing made by the state in particular may have the important impact to confront terrorism indirectly by confronting the slums. To what extent you've made a great achievement to eradicate the slums and their impact in expansion, the housing and their movement from dangerous areas, according to your classification, that has a great role in confronting such a long-standing issue. We've already executed 1.5 million housing units of different sites. Most of them social housing and alternative for slums. 77% produced by the state in the past 7 years in the field of social housing and the alternative slums housing. Dangerous areas were eradicated totally and relocated 200,000 people. Therefore, the concern of the state of a great part of such a segmentation, 55% of total spend on housing projects, not just building the housing unit, and the rest is developing the roads and facilities. We are not actually focusing on building housing units. We are establishing a complete society and community of full activities, and the issue of elevating the efficacy and the potentials and paying attention to the youth is actually within the system of the housing unit. That gave us an indication of the issue is not just a big concern of the stone, but the human being. Mr. Minister, do you have a specific strategy to declare that Egypt is free of slums? I may say that we announce that Egypt is free of constant dangerous areas. But the slums area, I would like to say that in the past we've produced a great areas of slums that made as a behavior to eradicate slums and a great issues or a great DCU that the state is working on it. And the last project announced by His Excellency, Mr. President, is to develop the capitals of the governorate. We have something like institutional relocation, taking the new areas to be allocate the people as defined by unplanned areas, and we make gradual planning that require great amount of budget. You've talked about the slum idea or thought. To what extent there is a synergy of efforts to confront such as thoughts? I think while we opened soon Al-Asmarat, there was a focus on the sport or physical and social side. We've already noticed the efforts of the relevant authorities that produced champions that worked on it, and the ministers and relevant entities made a great effort with their families to have them gradually transform. I think everybody is working with us shoulder to shoulder, and that is indicated the 45% of different sectors. Thanks, Mr. President, and we congratulate you for such projects. Dear viewers, as we followed with you, the citizen is the main goal of the state, building Egyptian citizen of different sides that is related in education, transportation, societal network paid by the state, or for the sickness of building the Egyptian state as well as the Egyptian citizen.
راية ونسر عالمك يا مصر مرفوع بنصر بعون الله، أمن وأمان في كل مكان، جرس أذان ذكر والصلاة. الله 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 على رجالة مصر، الله 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 الله. قالها الجيش والشعب معاه، قالها الجيش والشعب معاه. الجيش المصري الجبار اللي ماسك بايديه النار، عاد 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 ليل ونهار واقف على الجبهة. الجيش اللي صنع رجالة ليها كلمة وهدف ورسالة، عاد 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 غير لله ما حناش الجبهة. الجيش المصري الجبار اللي ماسك بايديه النار، عاش عاش ليل ونهار واقف على الجبهة. الجيش اللي صنع رجالة ليها كلمة وهدف ورسالة، عاش عاش غير لله ما حداش الجبهة. بالقيادة وبال جيشك وشعبك الكل جنبك. دور مصانعك، دور عمر في أرضك، عمر جيشك وشعبك الكل جنبك. ازرع وخطر، علم وكبر، بلدك بتكبر الله ينور. ازرع وخطر، علم وكبر،
وليد سمير.
هو مش هيكسر في اي حاجه عشان يبقى الشكل وحش. هيروح بقى لامم التلفزيون مع علام خلي كلهم كان واحد.
الفرش الداخلي مع تصميم
يا ريت. هو طبعا الناس هتيجي هتبقى جايه بتحكيسها يعني. انما الناس واحد كده.
شايفه حلم أو خيال، أوصف الجمال ده أقول في إيه؟ اللي جه وشاف ده كله قال بصوا شوفوا مصر عاملة إيه. ده اللي شايفه خيال واخد قلبي وعيني، الجمال ده يا عيني جنة ولا عالبال. اللي شايفه خيال واخد قلبي وعيني، الجمال ده يا عيني جنة ولا عالبال. صدق اللي هتشوفه بعينيك، في البلد دي لسه فيه وفيه دنيا تانية حلوة بتناديك. بصوا شوفوا مصر عاملة ايه. ده اللي شايفه خيال واخد قلبي وعيني، الجمال ده يا عيني جنة ولا عالبال. اللي شايفه خيال واخد قلبي وعيني، الجمال ده يا عيني جنة ولا عالبال.
أعلن اليوم انطلاق مشروعنا الوطني الأعظم لتنمية الريف المصري حياة كريمة.